Up next, we have a talk titled Fast Not Furious with Hywel Carver and Reuben Sutton. Now, Hywel wrote his first program in C aged 9. After graduating with an MEng from Cambridge, he dropped out of his PhD program to co-found his first startup. Today, Hywel is Skillerwhale's co-founder and CEO. He is a CTO craft expert, runs a dinner club for CTOs, has written a book to teach 10-year-olds computer science, and is designing and building his own 8-bit computer for playing Pong. In his 12-plus year career, he's been building and scaling startups from the ground up. With Skillerwhale, he is drawing on that experience to solve the biggest problem he faced as a CTO, learning for engineering teams. Reuben has over a decade of experience leading high-performing engineering teams. He currently leads the engineering team at software delivery analytics company PlanDeck. In his role, he focuses on helping to make teams become more high-performing through data. Hywel and Reuben, over to you guys.
Hello, I'm Hywel Carver. I've been a CTO for 10 years and I'm now the CEO of Skillerwhale. At Skillerwhale, we do an unusual form of training that we call targeted capability training, which is defined by 3 things. So that means all of our training happens live with an expert. It's all focused on solving simulated problems, hands-on, so that people can apply what they're learning. And the topics are targeted to what people need to know, things that they don't know already, and are going to be useful for the organization that they're working in. We've been working with PlanDeck to expand their team's capabilities, and you'll hear a bit from Reuben, who leads that team, in a second. And we're going to be talking today about how to get continuous improvement in your products by adopting new technology, and the link between that and continuous improvement of your team, the kind of impacts you can get from that approach to continuous improvement and the ways to measure them. Reuben, can I pass to you to say a few words about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Hal. So I'm Reuben Sutton. I run the engineering team at PlanDeck. What PlanDeck does is uses data science to empower teams to improve their development processes, remove bottlenecks, and keep work flowing smoothly.
Awesome. So the thing we're going to talk about today is the change that you made from, I believe, using Ember.js to React.js last year. And I wanted to start by understanding a bit about the decision to move from Ember to React and what prompted that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're still quite a young company. So we've been going for about 2 years when we made this decision. And what basically happened is we'd gone through a period of rapid growth, both in terms of number of customers, but also how big those customers were. And so one of our first customers has somewhere near 2,000 engineers on the platform. And so we were learning very rapidly from those customers, and it started, and we pushed what was sort of an MVP that we kept building on to its limits. It became very hard to innovate on the platform. It became very hard to hire. So when things slowed down, as they sort of naturally do, we couldn't add capacity to help us work through those problems. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. Presumably that rewrite was quite a big step to take for a relatively small team. So I'm interested in how you got buy-in from all the other stakeholders in the business to do that.
Yeah, of course. So at PlanDeck, we are a very data-driven company, and what we did was sort of looked at both how we were delivering every feature, but also the pace and the velocity that we were delivering key initiatives. And once that was clear, that made it much easier to sell it internally as a problem and a direction we needed to take. And then we took a very strategic view of looking at the problem, looking at alternatives to doing a full rebuild, because obviously as a young company, doing a rebuild is somewhere between gutsy and maybe a little terrifying. And so then we looked at how we would have to pull it off. How would we convert our team of Ember developers to React developers, the other things that needed to change, and the key improvements that we wanted to see as a result of it.
So what were those improvements that you wanted to see, and how did you measure them to know that you'd made those improvements?
Things like the rate of feature delivery, the large initiatives being delivered, how long it's taking from work to go from, us all sitting down and going, this is a really good idea, this will really solve a problem for a particular customer, to that customer drawing benefit from that feature. And so it's a mix of things, but really it's those things. And the really important thing for us at that time was the big innovative features rather than just incremental improvements.
And it's worth saying explicitly that the tool that you used to do those measures, I assume, was PlanDeck itself.
Yes, absolutely. So we use PlanDeck a lot for building PlanDeck, and it's become a really great tool for leading a team like mine.
So then, once you decided to go about making this change and you'd got the buy-in from your stakeholders, how did you go about making the change happen?
So we looked at a few options, like, should we hire contractors? But that has obvious drawbacks in that it's quite financially intensive, and I've only ever seen really quite mixed results when bringing in a sort of senior contractor and hoping like the team will draw from them. It levels them up, but maybe not quite to the level that we'd hoped for. And so, and in practical terms, what we did was wrapped up the key features that customers couldn't live without for 3 months while we went on this journey. And we tried, and once that had happened, we started working on it. So on this graph here, you can see the period immediately prior to us making this decision and starting work, where it's very volatile, things are very up and down. And this is, I should probably say, this is the lead time for stories from idea to production. And sort of halfway through, you start to see where we started working with Skillerwhale. And prior to Skillerwhale, I should probably say we tried some other approaches like front-end masters, I think it's Egghead.io, and sort of, despite encouragement to draw on those resources, the team actually feeling like they had the time was difficult, and it was also quite difficult for the team to know what they didn't know. And so at the start of sort of a couple of weeks into January, we started working with Skillerwhale, doing some targeted training, and we initially started as a try this out thing, and then we very rapidly saw in the data through the second half of the graph that the volatility of delivery really evened out, which was very positive to see.
And then once we had started working together and that change was really underway, what was the impact of that over a slightly longer time period?
So over a slightly long period, so sort of to now, essentially, what we've seen is a much smoother path to delivering stories. So we see, a lot more of a steady flow. There's still ups and downs, but you can see here that, which covers the first period and up till the end of last year, and you can start to see that the peaks and troughs are still there, and I think they'll always be there for an engineering team, but they're a lot smoother. the dotted rolling average line shows a much sort of smoother path to delivery. And I think one of the really key things about having used this data is it very much aligns with how we feel things are going, which is also very positive.
The quantitative is sort of supporting the qualitative, that you feel things are speeding up and going more smoothly.
Yes, exactly.
And so what do you feel are your main learnings from this whole experience that you would share? You talked about it as a journey. What are your learnings from the journey?
So probably the most important learning was that I wish we'd done this earlier. It's been really, both the rebuild has been really positive, really well received by our clients. We saw an immediate uptick in NPS, and for a rebuild, it wasn't easy. No rebuild ever is, but it felt very much that we sort of did it quite smoothly. I mean, it took 4 or 5 months till it was in customers' hands. And the other learning is, if I was embarking on something like this again, I would invest more time into thinking about training rather than sort of hoping that quite a pull model of you've got these resources and please go draw on them would work.
So, got it. So yeah, it sounds like you felt the benefits of switching to of tying the continuous improvement of a product to the continuous improvement of a team. And I know that individual projects can sit within that continuous approach, but ideally projects aren't the only time we look to change what teams are capable of. Having felt those improvements, how do you now communicate those to non-technical people?
So communicating to non-technical people, it's largely the same set of metrics. Now it's sort of a product we're maintaining. We look very much at a couple more measures like escape defects. There's a couple of things we don't do that I think are worth explaining why, because they're both very sort of popular approaches to measuring the effectiveness of a team. So the first would be story point velocity. It's interesting, but it's not a good language to communicate with a stakeholder about. The co-founders of the business, and I think most senior executives don't have a good intuitive sense of what a story point is. And so that's not really part of it. We focus very much on this end-to-end, the time that they consider the work has been committed to until that work is done. And that makes sense to everyone. And the other thing we don't do is follow the accelerate metrics, because while they're very interesting and they're very good for an operational sort of the effectiveness of your deployment processes, they don't, I think, answer really key questions about like the unpredictable bit of engineering, which is the actual product development, the building, and it lacks that sort of close communication with a stakeholder. Like, as most stakeholders don't really know what a pull request is, and even more. And so measuring the time from creation till deployment of a pull request it's useful, but it's a great KPI for a team to have for themselves, but that your stakeholders fundamentally aren't going to care if you cut that from 5 days to 4 days, but the time in the backlog, the time in development still lasts for 2 months. It's sort of as simple as that, really.
So your internal metrics end up being a bit different maybe to your external ones that you would talk to other stakeholders about.
Absolutely, yeah. So measuring a team by, measures that they aren't in control of is ultimately quite harsh, because if the team is under capacity or, just simply busy, they don't really have much control of how long things spend on the backlog. That's sort of a KPI for someone else. But in terms of, and so we look for measures which feel very appropriate for the teams using them.
So I think it's really great that you're putting the team at the center of that thinking about metrics. How has this whole process changed your view on improving the team's capabilities?
So we initially started the React training as sort of as training to improve the capabilities of the team for one project. And you can see here the sort of smaller radar area is where the team were when they started, and this is where it was afterwards. And so what we felt was that the results there had been so positive, so good at helping us solve business problems, that we wanted to look at other areas where we had business problems we could work on. And so we've now got a team learning advanced Postgres and using that to improve the speed and stability of our data processing pipeline, which is really key for us, and we're already seeing very good results from it.
Awesome. And I have to say, I really like this story, Reuben, because it starts with a need for commercial measures to improve, and then you link those to a specific project that you thought were going to improve the measures that you had for the tech team. And then I think the way we were able to step in and help was by measuring the individuals in the team and their capabilities, and by changing those, you've seen this kind of benefit up the pipe. And I actually think that's part of this philosophy that you and I have talked about a lot, of targeted capability training. And I think for it to be continuous improvement, it really has to be relevant to what the company needs, and to be at the very boundaries of what people already know. Otherwise, it's just a kind of potentially a waste of their time, and potentially not great use of company resources. I know that with your team having a lot to do, the idea of a 5-day course was really impossible. Like, taking them away would have been almost unthinkable in terms of the impact on the velocity as well as the financial commitment in a single go. And I think that's why the kind of small 1-hour sessions and that continuous approach worked a lot better than maybe some of the things that you'd tried before. And in terms of being active, how much focus we put on learning capabilities by doing, rather than just passively taking in videos or reading, but instead being genuinely challenged and having something that you have to solve hands-on in a kind of simulated environment. It means that you come away with that new skill, and you're really in a position to apply and evaluate your own work. So I hope we've given people an opportunity to rethink about how they approach improving their teams, and the way that they could do it in a continuous way, as they already do with their other measures. And I just want to say thank you for sharing so much, Reuben.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you too. It's been a pleasure speaking with you about it.